probably leave it open so they can holler at you if they need to. Welcome everybody to the first ever edition of Iowa City's Other News. A collective will be bringing you the news every other week from a grassroots social peace activist viewpoint. We'll be roaming around the Iowa City area with our cameras, hopefully getting some news that's not reported elsewhere or giving you a different slant, the progressive slant on the news. Today, we're going to show you some video clips from the Iowa City Council work session and from the Iowa City Council meeting. There are a couple issues that have been rather contentious in the past week at City Council. One of them is vacating properties on Grand Avenue and Prentice and Harrison Street. There also was a rather contentious issue where Iowa City Councilman Stephen Cantor, who incidentally is also a member of the Iowa City Other News Collective, was booted off of the Johnson County Council of Governments. And we'll have Stephen Cantor on to talk with us about that. And then at the end of the show, we'll have footage from the Wednesday's Iowa City anti-war protest, protesting the potential upcoming war with Iraq, an issue that I noticed did not manage to get any coverage on the Iowa City, the Cedar Rapids news stations, but Iowa City's Other News was there with a camera, and we'll have that story for you at the end. Anyway, first what we're going to do is talk about the vacation of property for the University of Iowa over on Grand Avenue Court. This is an area where the interests of several different groups have come into conflict. The university, the city, the environmental groups, and the historic preservation groups. This area is no bigger than the size of a football field, but it's generated a lot of controversy in the past week. The University of Iowa wants the city to vacate these properties so they can build and continue to expand over there. So let's roll. We have about 7 minutes of footage here, and we'll roll this footage, and it's the highlights of the Iowa City Council work session from Monday, and also the regular City Council meeting on Tuesday. So we'll roll that footage, and then we'll have Stephen Cantor on later.
What concerned us was the discussion at the council formal meeting last week about the Canongate House and Grand Avenue Court. And it looked as though the council might be approving the vacation of Grand Avenue Court without a specific signed legal document assuring and committing the university to following the guidelines of the Historic Preservation Council here in Iowa City.
I have concerns for both. The biggest one probably is the road, and the road may be part of how and what can happen with the house. I would like to save the house, whether it gets saved in that location. I don't know how I'll come down on that. That would be after we get all the planning done for the road and take a look at all of this. But I'm definitely looking at voting no on vacation until such time as the road plan has been completed.
I'm a native of the city football stadium every weekend my whole life, and quite frankly, I've noticed it's there, but I've never noticed traffic on it. University presently owns every structure on it but one. Cannon Gay House, they have sent us a letter with their best intentions to preserve this.
The City of Iowa City owns Prentice and Harrison Street right now. They have access through to the river, but it's been fenced off by the university, so if a person wants to go down there fishing or something like that, they cannot get through to the river. My main concern with vacating any of these areas in here is that the university, as in this drawing here, is going to put a fence up the length of the thing between the river and my access. Now, on one of our memos from John Adams, we are requesting that there be a blanket easement so that we can get through to the river to go fishing or utilities or anything like that. And I think the university's feet should be held to the fire on this also, just like the house, like the street vacation, that they live up to their agreements and not go back on them at a later date that they're choosing.
I agree with the majority of P&Z that we shouldn't be vacating, or if we do vacate, not convey. And I'll tell you what my thoughts have been, and they've been swirling around now. I just came back from a national transportation meeting, and I constantly hear the conversation of the cities trying to get right away from multimodal. Okay.
The point you're making, Ernie, is I think why we need to hold on to this, because whatever leverage we have is this small amount. We know that we can't regulate the state. We don't know exactly where we want to place that or if we're going to have that. We need to work with the university more in depth to talk about these issues. Also, we need to talk about the concern we have on Melrose and losing housing stock. What happened on the court, Grand Avenue Court, and is happening up and down Melrose, we heard screams on Lucas and Governor for the same type of thing happening. Housing, traditional housing stock being torn down and being replaced with large facilities. And we don't have any kind of ability to regulate the university except with some of these things as negotiating chips and say, hey, let's sit down and talk and see what's going to be best in the future for both of our entities. A year from now, 5 years, 20 years from now. Transportation, housing, we need to talk more. And that's why I think it's not appropriate now to convey these, maybe vacate, but certainly not to convey. And we need to talk about visions like Dee is proposing and others have proposed.
First of all, I would like to applaud the courageous action you took last night when you required the University of Iowa to adhere to the Historic Preservation Ordinance as it applies to the Cannon Gay House. Were this the only issue, I would be up here congratulating you on having done the right thing. However, I believe there are two other issues that really affect this decision concerning the order to vacate, and I'm here actually to ask you to deny the order to vacate altogether. The first issue has to do with Grand Avenue Court itself. I have heard, I think, 3 arguments supporting the idea that this street should be closed. The first one is it's a very narrow street. By way of comparison, Melrose Court is the only through street from Melrose Avenue south to Greenwood Drive, Myrtle Avenue, the Roosevelt School District, and Benton School. It carries a lot of traffic. It's 18 feet wide. Grand Avenue Court, we read in yesterday's paper, is 23 feet wide. I think the width of the street has nothing to do with the decision. The second issue is that presumably not many cars go on this street, although to my knowledge there's never been a traffic count. We do know that the people who probably use this street are people who live east of the river, who come across the river to go to the south end of Melrose, to go to the law school, to drop their kids off at the daycare centers, to use the Mormon Institute building, and of course there are the residents on Lucan Drive. And we seem to be asking the question about Grand Avenue Court, why shouldn't we close it? The university has come and asked you, and we're saying, well, why not do it? But it looks to me that we have a street that works well, that carries traffic, that isn't disturbing a residential neighborhood, and that's taking some pressure off an already difficult intersection. So it seems to me the more appropriate question would be, why should we close it? I don't see any real compelling information so far to lead me to believe this is the right case. And I will say the university's argument, as I understand it, is not compelling at all. I have read that the university has said they want to close this street because traffic will be traveling too close to the building. But I mean, the street was there before the building construction began. If the footprint of the building had been moved several feet to the west, this would not be a problem. Should I?
I don't see the vacation of this street as having any impact on the traffic situation, and I will support it.
And if you want.
All right, we saw these clips from the work session and the city council meeting Tuesday. Here to talk to me about this is Stephen Cantor, Iowa City Council member and member of the Iowa City's Other News Collective. Stephen, one thing that struck me after attending the work sessions and watching the council meeting on television is that members of the Planning and Zoning Commission seem palpably angry at the university for acting without consulting the city. Yet in the reportage in the Iowa City Press Citizen and in the Iowa City Gazette, I didn't hear that conveyed at all. What's your feelings about that?
Well, I think there perhaps is some concern on the part of planning and zoning and a majority of council, especially in regards to the historic house, the Canongay house that's at the site. This is on Melrose near Grand Avenue Court, actually right there at the intersection. And a lot of houses have been removed already. The university is building there. So there's concern for the specific historic house. In my mind, and I think some other people, there's concern about other issues. In our Southwest District Plan, which we're in the process of adopting this month, there's a paragraph or two that talks about neighborhood concern of losing housing stock. And as I brought up on the tape, this happens in other areas. We have recourse with the university. The city doesn't have any recourse because our zoning code and our laws don't hold any sway over a state institution like the university. So this issue is important, the vacation or giving up of streets, because we have a little bit of leverage with the university as a bargaining chip to negotiate with them and try to find a solution that works out well for the university and the general city and community.
Can you explain to me and the viewers exactly what the difference is between conveying a property and vacating a property?
If we have a street or an alleyway where the public is allowed to go on, anybody is allowed to use, if we want to not allow those people to use it, we have to vacate it. This is under state law. And you have to do 3 readings or vote on it 3 times normally. And then once it's vacated, the city could hold on to it and say it's not for public use, or it could sell it to some entity at fair market value. And the university wants us to sell the property at Melrose and Grand Avenue Court to them so that they can continue to use that property for their future plans of building buildings. They're also buying up a lot of houses on Melrose. They've already bought them up. And then down on south of Burlington at Front and Prentice, they want us to vacate some property down there so that they can build another parking lot and eventually use it for other buildings that they have planned down the road.
Now, building another parking lot in that area has great implications for the future transportation issues in Iowa City.
One thing you didn't hear on this tape, but we had Dave Rickett, who's the head of transportation at UI, come and speak to us at our Tuesday council meeting. And he has some concerns, too, about building more parking lots and encouraging car usage. He'd like to promote alternative transportation, and the university is doing a lot of good things. They give reduced bus passes, and they try to keep the parking on the outskirts. They have van pools, and they're talking about possibly getting a commuter train going between at least North Liberty and Iowa City. But I think the university and Dave Ricketts needs people in the community from Iowa City to pressure the city to help promote those kind of things. We do an okay job, but we can do a heck of a lot better in promoting. We spend a lot of tax dollars. There's a lot of cost to the private transportation use we have. And my feeling, and I think there's a lot of people that feel this way, we can do even better in promoting transit. Madison has, I think, 25% of their workers commuting by bike every day. And
That's a good, it'd be nice to see that here.
yeah, it's pretty cold up there, so
Yeah.
it's no excuse.
Well, Stephen, let's move on to the next issue about the city council. This week, at the Tuesday city council meeting, you were removed from the Johnson County Council of Governments. So that's a rather contentious issue in the community, I think. Let's talk about that. But first, let's look at about 3 minutes of tape that we have on that issue.
Are we going to the Green Monster this time?
No.
No Green Monster, you're safe.
Item 22, consider a resolution to remove council member Stephen Cantor from the J.C. Cog Urbanized Area Policy Board due to his failure to vote in accordance with formal city council policy.
But I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of Stephen Cantor. He's my friend. I also cherish the friendship of his mother and his sister, but that's not why I'm here. The important thing is I voted for him, and I would like to support the things he's doing. I voted for Mr. Cantor because he's intelligent, tolerant, and well-informed, just like the rest of the city council members. But Mr. Cantor goes a step further with his intelligence. He questions decisions.
I would like to make a motion,
We have a motion on the floor.
an addendum to the motion.
An amendment?
Yes. That we postpone action on this resolution until the December 10th meeting, because I believe the hubris of the majority of the council has kind of gone amok, and this is kind of a lot of unnecessary politicking going on.
Is there a second to the amendment?
Sure, I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to postpone this to the 10th of December. All in favor of that amendment, say
Well,
aye.
what about discussion?
Discuss it. Go ahead.
Irvin, why do you want to push it to December?
I think this whole atmosphere is pretty charged. I sat and watched the taping of the work session, and that is really something that kind of turns your stomach when I watched what went on there. And I just think that this is too emotionally charged at this time, and I think a month or so of letting the dust settle. And then I read the letter from the editor in the paper today. It's almost like you're expecting a lynch mob to come in and get Stephen, and I don't think that's right. I don't think we should make a...
Well, yeah, that's some footage from the city council meeting. Stephen was removed from the Johnson County Council of Governments. Stephen, it seems to me that this is a poor rule. I think councilors should be allowed to vote the way they want to, even on an outside commission, and I think to force them to vote with the majority is a very undemocratic proposition. However, this policy, which I think is wrong, was arrived at through a democratic process, and so now that I support it in one sense, I oppose it in another. What are your feelings about it now that you're off COGS, J.C. COGS, and do you plan to appeal that decision?
Well, there's a few different issues. There's the resolution itself that was passed a year ago that said a council member had to vote in lockstep with the rest of the council on this regional body that 6 of our 7 council members are appointed to. There's a 14-member body, and we have 6 of the 14 votes. And the one thing that it does is it spends federal transportation dollars that come in, and it deploys it to different communities. And certainly when you have 6 members voting, I think there's room for some dissension. In fact, it makes for a healthier debate and healthier decision-making. So I think it was a bad decision to pass it, and I think a lot of people in Iowa City feel the same way. The other issue is, did I in fact vote against the council policy? This is in regards to a development issue that Southgate is doing between Coralville and Iowa City, and they want to build a road. They want us to kick in $1 million. And the issue is, when is it going to be done? Maybe it's a good project 10, 20 years down the road, as we were originally being told. It's being sped up until finally Southgate wanted it next year. Time frame was removed by council. J.C. Coggs had that time frame within the next 5 years. I thought that was wrong, against council policy, and I voted against it. So we heard Ernie Lehman say the facts are the facts before we even had debate on it. And the facts aren't the facts. There's a lot of different perspectives that one can view these things and other things. That's why we're doing this program, because everybody has a perspective. We have the Gazette and the Press Citizen, which is owned by Gannett, a big multinational corporation, and they have a perspective, just like Iowa City's Other News. Certainly when we put this together, this show, you and I helped do this, other people, we have a perspective, and that's okay.
Absolutely.
We're out front about it, and we're talking about it. I don't think the other for-profit news media sources really talk about it in the same way we're doing, and that's a problem.
I think they would demand, or they would assert that they are completely objective. And I would say that nobody is completely objective, and the people who are the most objective are the people who realize and acknowledge their biases.
And so I think we're moving in the right direction. I hope other people will join us, and people can get information on that later on at the closing credits about how they can work with us. So then the third thing is, this is, I think, making a mountain out of a molehill. It's not like Nixon resigning after Watergate. Johnson County Council of Government, it's good to have a voice like mine representing views that aren't heard there. It's mostly staff-driven, and I think it's going to be missed. On the other hand, a lot of it's a done deal by the time it gets to J.C. Coggs. In fact, we were told by the director of J.C. Coggs we're not there to have these long debates on these issues. And it passes things almost 13-1 or 14-0. Most are 14-0. So it seems kind of foolish that council is so concerned about these things. So you'll lose an important voice. On the other hand, it's not, again, like we're declaring war on Iraq. Those are important issues, and with you and others here, we're going to be concerned about those issues. We're going to continue to work on war issues, peace and justice issues, locally, nationally, internationally. We're going to put it all together, and those are the important things that we got to keep working on.
Let me ask you this before we go on to our next segment. Will you be appealing the decision to remove you from J.C. Coggs, or have you decided that yet?
I haven't decided. I have to talk with some people. I do want to be able to talk about important issues on J.C. Coggs, like encouraging more public transit and alternative means of transportation. We have flexibility in using that money, and we can put more money into those issues. Talk about municipal electric on a regional level. Iowa City's exploring that. University of Iowa is exploring it. So it's pretty exciting, and we could probably even get a better deal if we do it regionally, municipal public power system. Other people and myself have talked about education. What's the best way to use our money to educate and care for young people in this community? And we can do that through J.C. Coggs. It could act as a good coordinating body. It could do a lot more. And talk about these issues with the streets, with the university. That was the first issue here. So we could do a lot more. I'd like to be a part of that. And I'm going to talk with people in the community and see what they have to say. I've gotten some calls of support, and make my decision within 30 days.
Great, great. Well, thanks for talking with us about that. We're going to go on to the final segment of the show. I was at the anti-war rally on Wednesday. I shot some footage of this, and we'll roll that. We can remove the screen from behind us. Show you on the background here.
Get ready for the green again.
I noticed that the KCRG, KGAN were not there, but Iowa City's Other News was there, and we filmed this footage. I also got on the internet, and I found that there are over 66 cities in 32 states and around the country where marches similar to this are going on, 10 to 20,000 in Los Angeles, 10,000 in San Francisco. I found an indiemedia.org website that had incredible pictures, 1 million to 1.5 million people protesting against the war in Iraq, in Italy, Bologna, Milan, and all the cities of Italy. Yet here the protests are relatively smaller, and I guess I was a little disappointed that there weren't more people at this Iowa City rally.
Greg, why? Well, on the one hand, compared per capita to other cities like London, we probably would, if we were in London, it would be 30,000 people per capita. But my question is, why in the United States do we keep repeating these things? We have actual war buildups in an overt way, then we have covert actions and support, like in Colombia and Israel and Egypt and Saudi Arabia, human rights abusers left and right. We've been doing the same thing for decades and decades in Chile, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and in Asia. We're usually on the wrong side. We're doing war in one form or another, and we have these protests and they flare up. How do we get together? Do you have any thoughts on that and move the movement forward?
I don't know. I found it disappointing that the majority of Democrats in the Senate voted for the war resolution. I was disappointed that Tom Harkin voted for the war resolution. And I guess one solution in the electoral arena is to say that if you are a peace activist, you will never again vote for any Democrat or Republican who supported this resolution. And as a longtime Green, I would recommend that people vote for the Green Party candidate. There is a Green Party candidate for Senate, Tim Harthen, who is a city councilor from Emmitsburg. He's a good man. And he, like all other Greens, opposes the war. If you want to vote against the war in Iraq, vote for Tim Harthen for Senate. That's my message, one of my messages.
So that's one solution, is look for other people that are going to stay true to their principles and work on peace issues.
And beyond that, I think the electoral arena is somewhat limited. We've got to get out in the streets. We've got to do civil disobedience, because sometimes just voting is obviously not enough.
So there is an action in Des Moines at the, I don't know if it's the National Guard or the Army Reserves, where they take off to do air support in Iraq for the United States Armed Forces there, and people are going to be gathering there for a nonviolent action. October 26th, people are going from Iowa City, and hopefully people will be working on that.
What do you think about the, I'm sorry, it was Mark?
No, go ahead.
What do you think about the local situation? Are the anti-war groups in this area coordinating well? Are we working well with each other?
To a certain extent, and that's another question I have, is it better to have a bunch of little groups working on their own? We had Wednesday, a longtime peace activist, Carol DePross, organized this march and rally on Wednesday that drew the biggest crowd yet. We have Iowans for Peace. We have Iowans for Peace with Iraq, People for Justice in Palestine. We have Campaign Against War. We have all these different groups that are drawing people, and I don't know what the answer is. I think, though, there is a way to get better organized, and I think we have to act locally. I remember what I wanted to say. There are communities across the country that their councils are passing resolution against the war. Northampton, Massachusetts passed a resolution against the Patriot Act, and it requires anyone to report anyone that's been subject to the Patriot Act, an investigation. That has to go to their Human Rights Commission, where they look into this, and it also asks their U.S. representatives to investigate the constitutionality of that. We're trying to get that in Iowa City, too. Some people have brought that up. I brought it up to council, and hopefully we'll get some support for that locally. We need people to work locally, think globally, act locally.
Yeah. So you'll be introducing a resolution to that effect in the Iowa City Council?
Yes, I will. I've already given some information out to fellow council members.
Good. I would urge people who are anti-war to get involved and help push that resolution. It's somewhat symbolic, but I think it's important to make a statement. Well, the feelings at the rally were really strong. The people were very emotional. There was a lot of singing. Julie Thomas was at the rally, and I thought that was interesting. I assume that means she is opposed to the war.
Well, we, Iowans for Peace, I'm talked with Jim Leach. We're looking at the video here as the credits come up, and we'll just finish up here. Jim Leach was very supportive. In fact, he voted against the war resolution, and lo and behold, Julie Thomas, 2 days later, she came to the anti-war rally.
So maybe her support is not strongly anti-war.
She needs, I think, to step up the pace with pointing out some progressive point of views that she could take.
Thanks for watching Iowa City's Other News. We'll be back in a couple weeks where we'll be talking about some other issues from a progressive, peace, social justice standpoint. For Iowa City's Other News, this is Greg Thompson.